Hi, hello. Welcome to your Unit 1 set of videos. Please make sure that you know exactly what homework format you need to use, and go ahead and get started. Alrighty, so our topic for today's video is starting to look at ancient China. And we're going to start with the early agricultural civilizations and what we know about the Xia dynasty. So, what are we going to get out of this? Number one, right? When should world history start? Number two, how does geography shape how a civilization develops? And then number three, how do you know if a civilization really existed? So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. And we're going to look at geography with the Yellow River. So like the Indus, right, river in ancient India, the Yellow River is boisterous and unpredictable. Why would unpredictable, right, be any concern to a historian? Keep that in mind. So it takes its name, Yellow River, or Huanhe, okay, from the vast quantities of light-colored soil that is getting picked up along its route. So kind of like turns the water yellowish, which I believe, hey, there we go. This is a modern day rendition of what the the Yellow River looks like. And it has a little yellowish hue to it, okay? So the Yellow River periodically unleashes a tremendous flood that devastates fields and communities and anything else that's in the area. The Yellow River has altered its course so many times and has caused so much destruction that it's nicknamed China's Sorrow. And I'm going to go back to our river map right here to kind of show you the thicker line, like that's the main route of the Yellow River. And yet you have all these smaller little areas coming out, excuse me, showcasing where the Yellow River could also diverge to as well. Yet, geographic conditions have also supported the development of complex societies in China. So even though there is this pretty unpredictable river in the area, there's still a huge life to this area, if you will. There is enough rainfall for crops, and you have early cultivators that had no need to build complex irrigation systems like those in Mesopotamia because there was enough rainfall in the area. The early peoples here invested a great deal of labor in trying to capture certain parts of the river, building dikes, just kind of directing the river in certain areas. And it's partially successful to limit the amount of flood damage that the Yellow River could cause. And soil in this area is incredibly fertile and very easy to work with. So before the introduction of metal tools, cultivators used wooden tools to try to bring in their generous harvest. And they did work. These wood tools definitely did work because of the soil, because it wasn't super duper hard. It was very flexible for them. So with the abundant harvests in northern China, it supported the development of several Neolithic societies during the centuries after 5000 BCE. And we're going to look at one specific society and village. We're going to look at the Yangshao, I believe, society, and the Bonpo village. And with all of these different Neolithic societies, they all developed, interestingly enough, their own style of pottery and architecture. And they each likely had their own political, social, and cultural traditions, even though they're all relatively close together next to the Yellow River. So it wasn't like the situation in ancient Egypt, for example, where you had that one river, only one civilization. Definitely not here in ancient China. There are multiple different societies along the Yellow River. So looking at the Yangshao society, which flourished from 5000 to 3000 BCE in the middle of the Yellow River Valley. It's especially known for their discovery of an entire Neolithic village that's pretty much intact called Bonpo, which I believe, there we go, I have an image right here just showcasing a part of it. So when it was unearthed, archaeologists found a large quantity of very fine painted pottery and bone tools that were most likely used by the early cultivators of this area. And hey, once again, as human population increased, the settlements like that of Bonpo cropped up all throughout much of China. In East Asia, as in other parts of the world, the concentration of people in small areas brought a need for recognized authorities who could maintain order, resolve disputes, and organize public works projects. So you have these village level organizations that sufficed for purely local affairs. But these village level organizations did little to prevent or resolve conflicts between neighboring villages, and there was no real authority when it comes to large scale projects. So, in the end, these little mini villages didn't really last for too long because they didn't have a necessary political structure to help them with larger conflicts and projects. Yeah, sorry, here's another rendition of the village. And here's some pottery. Alrighty. So according to Chinese legends, there's 3 ancient dynasties. We have the Xia, the Shang, and the Zhou dynasty. And here I have a map for you on the right-hand side, kind of showing you where they started and how they were essentially kind of like stacking on top of each other. All right. So these dynasties were hereditary states, meaning that they extended their control over progressively larger regions, although none of them embraced all the territories that were later claimed by the Chinese dynasties. There's a large number of written records and accounts that survive during the Zhou dynasty, which scholars have long recognized as a historical ruling house, which we'll look at more so in the coming days. Until recently, there's information about the Xi and the Shang dynasty that came from legendary accounts that scholars mostly did not trust. So, in other words, for a large portion of time, a lot of historians, archaeologists, they kind of just thought that the Xi and the Shang dynasty were just legend stories, fairy tale-esque. But there has been new information that's been coming out within the decades, centuries, that there is evidence that the Xia and the Shang dynasty have actually existed, which is pretty fascinating and awesome because we do have some evidence for that. So as a result of this distrust, many historians dismissed reports of the Xi and the Shang dynasties as mythical fantasies, as I just stated. So it was only later in the 20th century that archaeologists excavated evidence from the Xi and the Shang dynasty that they were indeed historical dynasties as opposed to just legendary stories. And we do have some information, but not a lot of information. So we're going to focus the rest of this video on the Xia dynasty. And the studies of this dynasty is still in its early stages. We still don't know a lot about this dynasty, but we do know it existed. It was pretty small as well, mostly all surrounding the Yellow River. So during the past few decades, there was discoveries that suggested that the Xia dynasty made up one of the first efforts to organize public life in China on a large scale, which is pretty incredible. Because in order to really organize, how everyday life is going to look like, where you should go for various problems or concerns, it takes a lot of time, skill, and communication. So at the very beginning of its time, it was pretty rigorous. It was a pretty strict state. And most likely the dynasty came into being by about 2200 BCE. By extending formal control over this region, the Xia dynasty established a precedent for hereditary monarchical rule in China. So in other words, the Xia dynasty was the very first dynasty that introduced the idea that you should have, a king, queen kind of a system, and that should go down based on the family line, as opposed to, people being elected, village elders ruling, etc. So ancient legends credit the dynasty's founder to the sage king Yu with the organization of a very effective flood control project. So same as Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt, there was a need during the Shia dynasty to organize large-scale public works projects specifically around farming, agriculture, around river control that helped establish recognized authorities as well as formal political institutions. So although there's no information that survives about the political institution of the Shia dynasty, historians can speculate that they probably exercised power throughout the Yellow River Valley region by controlling the leaders of individual villages. And by doing this, it encouraged the founding of cities, the development of metallurgy, aka just metalwork. Since the ruling classes needed to have some sort of administrative centers, they needed bronze weapons to maintain their control. And that's where we're going to end it for today. So, what did we learn? Hey, humans are, wow, I know, shocker, still complex. Geography impacts where humans live and how they develop. And we saw with the Yellow River Valley, a lot of individuals were pretty nervous about where they were living because the river was so unpredictable, and yet they stuck there because they understood the soil was incredibly fertile. And then lastly, there are some civilizations that historians just don't have any information about unless it's through pottery, through legends, or just through, little random sites that could potentially be a house, for example. Wow, what a fantastic, invigorating, insightful, productive, wonderful video that Miss I has created for you. Yes, I know, you can go ahead and clap for me. It's totally fine. Please, please, please make sure that you have completed whatever homework format I have asked and given to you for this video, and have a fantastic rest of your day. Goodbye.